Welcome to the Sacramento Injury Law Podcast.
Welcome to the Sacramento Injury Law Podcast with Brian Jacobsen from Aiken and Jacobsen. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host. With decades of experience fighting for the injured across Northern California, Brian is here to explain what defines an injury as serious under California law and why that distinction matters in your case. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure. Nice to be with you again, Lisa.
You know, Brian, what determines whether an injury is considered serious under California law or not?
Well, it's more semantics than anything else. It really, a serious injury to me would be something that is impaired your physical condition, such as maybe an amputation, loss of an eye, permanent disfigurement. They can also include, traumatic brain injuries, broken bones, severe burns. It's really anything that is other than maybe a what we would call soft tissue, meaning no broken bones, where you go to a doctor or a chiropractor for several months and more than likely get better. Anything other than that, I would treat as a serious injury just because it's going to have some long-term effect, more than likely have long-term effects on a person.
And I know that there's some differences between different terminology, so I'm going to throw out a couple more. Serious bodily injury versus great bodily injury. Again, what's the difference?
Well, that's more of a criminal term. We see it, I don't, but you would see it in the criminal setting. The difference would be great bodily injury is a higher legal standard than serious bodily injury. And again, a lot of this applies to the criminal setting because as far as I'm concerned, anything that is involving a broken bone or something significant, I guess would be my word that I would use, those all qualify as serious accidents to me, serious injuries. But if you're, the terms that you used, a great bodily injury is worse than a serious bodily injury under the way that it's treated under the law. Great bodily injury would be something maybe potentially life-threatening. Again, going back, to what we talked about, broken bones, paralysis, as opposed to something that would be what they would call serious, which would be maybe concussions, deep lacerations, but usually less severe.
And so we're help me understand this. Maybe I'm wrong
Sure.
on this, but what separates like the injury that heals over time versus one that permanently changes someone's life, and how does that affect your case?
Well, again, it's more semantics than anything else because it could be something that heals over time that still affects a person's life forever. For instance, an easy one would be, let's say, a hand surgeon injures his hand, loses a finger, something like that. Maybe it heals over time, but again, that hand surgeon is never going to probably go back to doing what they were doing. Another example would be maybe a teacher has an emotional injury that doesn't allow him or her to go back teaching again. Again, the injury itself, the physical part of the injury may heal, but that's going to affect the person over time. And again, it's something that as attorneys, we're always looking to find out. I mean, that's again, through investigation, we want to know how does it affect a person's lifestyle?
Because it's going to affect the outcome of the financial reward in the case, right?
Absolutely. The longer the effects go on, the more likely a jury is to award more significant damages. Absolutely.
And then how do serious injuries exceed California insurance limits? Even with the recent increases, it seems like more and more these days, things are expensive, medical is more expensive, automobile repairs are more expensive, but our
Yeah.
insurance limits have not caught up with that.
No, not at all. They did go from the minimum here in California used to be $15,000. It's now bumped up to $30,000. But again, like you say, that really hasn't caught up. The way that, in terms of your question, the way that it exceeds is going to be the cost of the medical bills. A day in a trauma unit may be $10,000, $15,000 nowadays, where a couple of days in that and you've exceeded the minimum limits. There are other things to look at. Maybe you've lost time from work and you've lost several thousand or tens of thousands of dollars because of your time off work because of the accident. And then on top of that, you've got the pain and suffering that goes along with it. So nowadays, it can go very quickly beyond what the minimum limits are in California.
And how do folks move forward with getting whole, getting healed when we're in that situation?
Very difficult sometimes. A lot of times it can be, again, you hope for the best that first the person isn't injured that bad. However, when they are, you hope that the other person has insurance that will cover you. I've found that that's 50-50 nowadays in California. The only thing I could tell you is, make sure that your own insurance limits, what they call uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, is high enough to protect you should something like that happen. That would be another way of going about getting a fair recovery for what you've had to go through, what a person's had to go through.
We can't always depend on the others, but we can take action and put things into place for ourselves. Back on track with serious injuries. How does the law treat visible injuries like scarring compared to injuries that affect someone's daily life?
Well, the law's supposed to treat them the same. What I've found in practice is that doesn't really happen. It's much easier for, like an insurance company, for instance, to be able to see someone who's got scarring versus someone who's got a traumatic brain injury. A traumatic brain injury can affect a person where you don't outwardly see the signs of it, but it can be as significant or more significant than a person who's had scarring on their hand or maybe a dog bite where they've got scarring on their face, something like that. So it's like I say, in theory, it's supposed to be treated the same, but what you have to do is, as an attorney, tell a better story and get better facts to explain what's going on if it's not an outwardly physically seeable type of an injury, like you said, scarring, that sort of thing.
Sure. Brian, what does it take to prove an injury is more serious than the insurance company is claiming?
Well, they always claim that. So that's, step one is just not listening to the insurance company. But really what it takes is a thorough investigation of the facts. Sometimes it may include talking to people around the person who was injured. A lot of times I deal with clients who are very stoic and don't want to come off as a complainer, so to speak. But it may be their significant other or spouse or friends who say, boy, Brian, I see this person on a daily basis and it's really affected him or her. Let me tell you why. So a lot of it has to deal with the attorney, myself, doing the investigation and trying to track down all those facts that make it a more, more serious than what the insurance company wants to believe. Because again, the insurance company, all they're going to do is look at the medical records, and the medical records may say, physically, you've healed in a couple of months' time. But there's a whole different component, an emotional component that goes along with that that may not heal, may take years to heal if it ever does sometimes. Certainly with a traumatic brain injury is probably the most of the time that we see where the insurance company just wants to devalue that just because you can't see it.
I understand that. Another term that we see or hear often is pain and suffering. What does pain and suffering include when an injury affects someone long term?
Well, the very narrow definition of pain and suffering is just going to be just that, pain and suffering. So if it's long term, it's going to be what a person suffers physically, their body over time. But I think what you're probably getting at is what a long term case would look like. And that's going to include many things. It's going to be the lifetime of your medical bills. You may stop treating, for instance, on this day, but a doctor has said you're going to need continued care, a couple of visits a year for the next 10 years, 15 years. That would also be included in a case where you're looking at over time, a person's going to hopefully get better. Some of the ways that we would prove that would be to get what's experts, but one of which is called a life care planner, which would actually try and put a value on how much that, whether it's medical care, loss of future earnings, all of those things go into long-term, I don't want to say pain and suffering necessarily, but the long-term value of the case. So that would be how I would classify it. I wouldn't just take the narrow pain and suffering because, again, that's only one part of what what the value of a long-term case would be.
And I imagine it's almost impossible to predict what that would look like. The medical care costs from 10 years ago versus medical care costs today, there's no comparison. How do you prove the
Correct.
cost of future medical care when treatment hasn't happened yet and time value of money?
Well, again, that's where we go back to, you can have, accountants, economic people who can look at what are the numbers today and what are the trends of what they're going to be like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Again, we would go to what we talked about earlier, a life care planning specialist, who are all experts in their field. They've done a lot of education schooling to come up with, they're going to put numbers to what you have to go through, and they'll put what they call a present value on what the care is going to be. Even if it's going to take 10, 15, 20 years, maybe the rest of your life, they'll put a value of what it costs today and what's likely going to be in the future.
Okay. And then what happens if someone settles a case and later realizes the injury is more serious than they first thought? Do they have any recourse?
Unfortunately, they don't in most cases. There's, if you could prove maybe fraud or something along those lines. The problem is and I get this every once in a while, is I get a person who comes to me and says, Brian, I signed a release, which is kind of the key. If they've signed the release and cashed the check, that's when it becomes problematic, because, again, what we're seeing is a lot of insurance companies are making offers within the first few weeks of the accident based on what they think is going to happen. And those are usually pennies on the dollar for the most part. But in today's economy, unfortunately, some people have to take it because money's money. I understand that. The problem is you might be selling out yourself if it turns out that, maybe after a few months treatment, the injury is more severe than what you thought. You end up needing surgery, for instance. Once you sign that release from the insurance company, the case is over as far as I'm concerned. There's not much I can do for you. So it does become a problem. You may have, unfortunately sold yourself short if you've signed that release and taken the money and accepted the money.
Brian, you've kind of hinted at a little bit of advice with folks getting started in a case. Don't jump too quickly. What are your thoughts or your opinion on how someone should really get started and make sure that they have knowledge about the injuries that they may have incurred?
Yeah, the first thing I tell everybody is talk to an attorney. In our field, we do free consultations, so it doesn't cost you anything other than maybe half hour, 45 minutes to sit with me, or, I'm pretty easy. I'll come to you or do a Zoom call, but talk to somebody who's in that field and can tell you, here's what you need to do. And the reason I tell them that is, for instance, if you're in a car accident and it's maybe disputed as to who's right or who's wrong, one of the things that by talking to an attorney, the attorney would explain is you want to go out and talk to the witnesses early on. Their memories are going to fade. They're going to forget about things the longer you wait. And people come to me and they say, well, what if I get done? What if I take a couple of months treating and then I go back to talk to them? Well, you suffer the possibility that they might have forgotten things and their memories are not as sharp. And all of a sudden it becomes, well, I don't really remember this, or I don't really remember that. So my advice is always just talk to an attorney, even to find out what your rights are, just to know what's going on. That's always the best method that I've found, is even if you don't want an attorney, at least know what your options are.
Well said. Thank you so much for keeping this simple and useful today. And that's it for today's episode.
You got it. Thank you for being with me again, Lisa.
Folks, thank you for listening to the Sacramento Injury Law Podcast. If you have questions about your own case or need expert advice following an accident, visit Brian at aikenjacobsenlaw.com to schedule a consultation or just resources, what's available to you. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to help others find these essential legal resources. We'll see you next time. Come on back.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.